Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to be discussing the slow writing technique, which I often use with students when they are writing descriptive or story writing, broadly under the umbrella of imaginative or creative writing. The aim of the slow writing technique is to get students to think about their writing sentence by sentence, which is why it's called slow writing. And it encourages students to think about and remind themselves of the key techniques or the key skills that they can use in an exam when they are writing a piece of descriptive writing, for example. The more students face these skills, the more likely they are to use them in an exam because they'll be able to remember, oh, simile or metaphor or semicolon. So it's designed to really cater to getting students to learn and remember the descriptive writing techniques. And once you have done this activity, you can actually end up writing something that you're quite proud of because you might not otherwise have written it without the techniques there to support you. So what does this slow writing technique involve? It involves a grid like this, and I get my student to cut each of these out. Of course, you can change these as well. But I get my students to cut out these grids so they have 16 slips of paper. And I then ask them to put those pieces of paper face down, or I ask them to put them in a pot and one at a time pull out one of these pieces of paper individually, and they have to write a sentence which contains what that piece of paper tells them. So, for example, if a student pulled out the sibilance card first, then the first sentence they had to write about something would have to use sibilance. Again, students can write 5 sentences, they can write 16 sentences. So it's up to you to decide how many sentences you want to write following these skills. So we have a total here of 16. Some of these skills are to do with devices, some of them are to do with punctuation, and some of them are to do with sentence constructions or sentence types. So we have a selection, for example, of long sentences, short sentences, as well as a list and a question. So it's also encouraging you to vary your sentence types to make your writing more compelling. This is actually the second video that I've done on slow writing technique. I did one about a year ago, and I'll put the link to that in the description box below. So I just wanted to do it again to show you two different images and what I ended up with when I followed this activity myself earlier today. So the first image, and those of you studying AQA, you know that for paper 1 question 5 you'll get an image to help prompt you, so that's why I'm using images. And you can see that out of those 16 options that I showed you in that grid a moment ago, these are the 10 that came out in this order. So my intention is to write 10 sentences about this image, with each sentence containing the device that is listed in that list there on the right hand side. So let me show you what I ended up writing. A scattering of daffodils covered the grass like a blanket beneath tall oak trees in this park. Next to them, a solitary man plodded through the mist, his footsteps rhythmically thudding on the dewy grass. His hands were cold, so cold in fact, that his lips were being attacked by the cold mid-morning air. Why didn't he wear a thicker coat? Avoiding all eye contact, he carried on walking, his boots decapitating stalks of grass as he thundered on, which stuck to his shoes. He disappeared into the misty gloom. Majestic and grand, spires of distant cathedrals pierced through the stubborn mist. The bells of St. Mary's, which had stood since the 1300s, occasionally sang out across the town and broke up the stark midwinter silence. Sporadically, crows and ravens shrieked in the distance, their black outstretched feathers contrasting with the whiteness of the whispering mist. Then stillness. So you can see with our numbers in brackets there where each sentence begins, and each of those sentences was written with the technique in that list on the left hand side. So the first sentence contains a simile, the second sentence contains a semicolon, the third sentence contains the repetition of the word cold, and so on. So that's what I ended up with, and I quite like the end as well, actually, with this two-word sentence, then stillness. It emphasises, if I had my language analysis hat on, it would emphasise how still and how peaceful perhaps this setting was, apart from the birds and the bells, perhaps. There's also a question in there, which is, better than just writing the same kind of sentence all the time. There's a semicolon in there. So that's what I ended up writing, following those 10 options that I pulled out of a pot when I did it myself earlier. So I quite like that. I quite like that, what I ended up with, and I might not have written that had I not had those instructions to support me in those sentences. The second image is very different. It's of a fairground, and again you can see I did exactly the same thing. I had those 16 cards in front of me, and I selected 10 at random, and these were the 10 that came out in this order. So as before, my intention is to write 10 sentences about this setting of the fairground. So let's have a look at what I wrote. The fairground was a maze of neon-lit pink candy floss happiness. A variety of rides awaited bright-eyed children, waltzers, dodgems, the Ferris wheel. Would there be enough time to go on them all? The big wheel looked as shiny as a new 10-pence piece, on which small capsules of people were lifted high into the air. Rides twisted and turned, spun and swirled, amid a chorus of screams and laughter. Bright yellow ducks, which had hooks coming out of the top of their rubber heads, eagerly awaited someone to catch them with a fishing rod to be rewarded with a prize. Excitement blossomed. Delighted and cheerful, children clutched the hands of their parents tightly. Their eyes lit up with all the flashing lights, their nostrils flooded with the smells of fried onions and toffee apples. Eagerly queuing for the next ride, the children missed the shocked look on their parents' faces as they peered into their empty wallets and purses. So those are the 10 sentences there that I ended up writing based on the list of cards that I pulled out of that hat, following the rules there on the list on the left-hand side. So again, that is a second example of this slow writing technique in action. Really get students to think about each sentence carefully, and in so doing, to hopefully remind students of some of the devices and techniques which are available to them when they write their story or their piece of descriptive writing. So hopefully that has been useful in terms of your slow writing revision, and thank you very much for watching.